This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation.
And I'm Eric Latiff. City, you've been having an issue about the society that we have and our value system. And you've had very many goes at what exactly is ailing our value system, what you call ailing our value system. And you have something bedeviling our society. And you've got something new today.
It isn't actually new. It's actually a continuation. If you look at our conversations, and even if you look at the things that we say, these things are really interconnected. You're going to talk about school, you will come in, the government will come in at some point. You'll talk about the betting industry, the government will come in at some point. You'll talk about services that need to be provided, which have been provided. You'll talk about individuals. But even as you talk about the government, you see, we are talking about the people who are mandated to run or to perform or to conduct certain functions for the government on behalf of the government. They're called civil servants. They're called government employees. And they represent the ethos of that government. The things they do, that the outcomes, that is what we use to judge our government, the performance of these people. And I'm saying that maybe we need to continue or begin, begin? We need to continue the beginning. We need to continue this discussion on what it is. What is this world view that Kenyans have gotten into that guarantees that almost everything we touch that is intended for the common good goes wrong? Whether we are building a railway, whether we are inspecting schools, whether we are trying to oversee the banking sector, whether we are trying to manage business opportunities in the betting industry, somewhere, what seems negative takes greater precedence than what is actually good. And then we are a male-centric society. And then we are a society that considers itself Christian. Mm-hmm. When we last spoke, I said the percentage was 83%. It's actually 84.7% of Kenyans who claim to be Christian. You can divide it up into evangelicals.
I like that you said who claim to be Christian.
Yes.
That's important.
It's important.
It's crucial.
I want to thank this agnostic who has great leanings towards Christianity. Now, where the problem arises, and this is where the hypocrisy, you've heard people complain that you find someone whose reputation is not really squeaky clean. Not that there is anything like squeaky clean with human beings, and they, let me say, questionable morals, but you'll find them holding high offices in church. This duplicity is disturbing. And many of these people are not women. It's not women they complain about, it's men. So it brings to the fore the role of men, not just in this community we call Kenya, but you break it down to the family unit, the example they set. Remember I said these things are tied in together. Then you're going to talk about the male child. You see, when people talk about the male child and the role of men, they forget that men also have daughters and they also influence what their daughters become. I am saying this. Somewhere along the line, our value system got so warped that wrong became right and right became wrong at some point. And this is a continuum, and everything we discuss revolves around this, and it boils down to who we are, not what we do, who we are, because what we do is a consequence of who we are, and we seem to be completely soulless and lost. That's really what I am saying. Yes, Eric, I know you take a deep breath and say, we discussed this. Yes, we did, and yes, we didn't. We looked at the aspect of what the government is doing to contribute to this soullessness. That's what I did. Yes. I said, robbing us of opportunities. No, forget the money. I was saying there's something more important. There's an entire generation that is going to be given the burden of being soulless because the government has deemed it so by the things they do. That's what I said earlier on. I'm now coming to the state where I'm saying we are now soulless. Not being, we are. How do you explain a situation?
What does the soul constitute of? What are the ingredients for the soul before we go into this discussion? Morals or happiness?
Value system.
A value system.
To put it very, very simply, value system. Yes. Like, for instance, it is not my face that feels happy. It is not the organ called my heart that feels happy. What is it that feels happy? What is it that gets depressed? What is it that gets despondent or exhilarated? What is it in you, the person? Yeah. That's what we're talking about. That thing.
And you're saying we lack morals
I'm saying we don't have it.
as a country.
Zero.
Interesting you bring this up because it's actually an index of morality globally now, and it's got a few factors as different criteria it considers. And I know you push the church as one of them, but with these countries, which we'll discuss in detail and we'll look at the criteria, what you'll find is that church doesn't play a big role in this.
Yes, these countries aren't called Kenya.
Right. But we can actually stipulate, we can
This one
actually
is.
copy paste and look at what other nations and cultures are doing in terms of ethics, gender, sexual equality,
Yes, we
and
should.
so on.
Yes,
and
we
there's a
should.
criteria they've set, and there's an index, a morality index. And if this is what you're talking about us lacking, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can take into account our cultures, our background, and so on. But you can look at what other countries are doing, which are considered to be high on the morality index, and actually try and emulate this. No.
You could, if you want to engage in an academic exercise.
No.
You actually could, and it is important that you look at it. But what I'm looking at, and why I brought in the element of Christianity into this, and why, you see, we declare ourselves a Christian nation, we call ourselves Christians. The duplicity, it plays out in that it brings about the sort of confusion that you see you have. On the one hand, we have leaders who are forever saying things, forever. And they seem to think that every time you have a problem, you solve it by saying something. Yes, we are going to create development. We are going to form a commission. We are always going to do something. And even when it's done and there's a report, you ask, okay, so that report that we had, what did you do about it? No, with that report, we are going to analyze it. And then when we analyze it, we are going to form another commission,
To implement it.
and it goes on and on and on. And the ills we speak of just keep spiraling upwards, meaning they keep increasing. It's not as though they increase. Even if you look at the discussions we've had even today, we're talking about betting, you're talking about education, we're talking about
The ferry.
yes, all these, that because a child died, a mother died. You even have a picture of the car sinking. If someone took a picture of that car sinking, and the report you get from the Navy, who are next door, was that they were looking for special equipment. You hold your head. The real disaster isn't even that. If you know the state of many of those ferries, the real disaster is yet to happen. It's yet to happen, because if you look at the way they're maintained, if you look at just the wherewithal surrounding that entire, it's symptomatic of what we have. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying, this thing, you can say it can't get worse. I'm saying it will. And the airbase we keep speaking about, this one we were talking about yesterday, that we'll
We
get
need to burn.
We are burning.
We're already burning.
It's slow, but we are already burning. When bad becomes normal, when evil becomes normal.
And so now we get to the point where we have measured.
Yes.
We get to the point where we are now beginning to measure and turn a blind eye into really how bad it is. In terms of,
Yes.
monies that have been pilfered, for example.
We talk
and
about
large amounts are no longer an issue.
only 7 billion. Only. Do you remember there was a time?
Just 8 people. It was only 8 people who died.
It was just this woman and her child who died. Just. Human life is never just, but we've gotten there. I remember Njeri gave an example sometime back. She was saying that Kenyans generally understand that, they're not against the stealing. It's the amount. Actually, steal a little bit. Must you steal all of it? Now,
Skim off the top.
Yeah, if it looks like, well, do you know just how bad that statement sounds when you look at it?
It's the truth.
Yes.
Those are our sentiments. That's how we think.
And that is why I'm saying
That's where we are.
Yes, and we
What's
are not
the role
going
of
to
men in
burn.
this?
We are going to
So
burn.
what
And I'm
can
saying,
we do,
what is the
CC?
role? Men seem to be, they claim, they state that they are the head. They are the ones who run things. Now, that role is disastrous for this nation.
So the men are failing Kenya.
No, failed.
The men of Kenya have failed
You
Kenya.
need to get this thing correct. Failed. Not failing, failed. Failed.
I haven't failed, but
We've failed. We've had all male presidents, varying degrees of success. We have male presidents now. Our parliament is predominantly male. Our corporate sector is predominantly male. Civil servants predominantly male. The employment
Teachers.
sector predominantly male. So,
And
tell
you
me,
feel if it was more women-dominated, would do better? Is
it
that what you're
would be
suggesting?
muted significantly. Women don't quite function the way men do.
So what would women bring to the table, do you reckon?
Sanity.
explain.
Women mitigate. Ask anyone who is married, and they will tell you that the thing they fear the most is something that they think their wife might not like. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they usually know instinctively that the wife is right. Mm-hmm. They know. But because we are men and she is a woman, most times she can't possibly be right. Not because of the matter at hand, but because she's a woman.
So why do we find ourselves in this patriarchy? Do you think it's a societal construct? Do you think that's the way humans are supposed to be? Is it because it's biblical? Why do we find ourselves in a situation where men dominate most aspects of life in terms of there's dominance in leadership, dominance in the home, of course the physical prowess, yes, but things have changed over time.
What we call
can
dominance,
do what men do.
What we call dominance isn't actually, it was never meant to be dominance. Mm-hmm. It was division of roles in society. It wasn't dominance. People played a part. Everybody had a role to play.
For balancing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But this dominance...
And no role was more important than the other.
No, not really.
So at what point and what created the patriarchy? And it's across all cultures, so there's a running thread there. So is this supposed to be our natural disposition, a patriarchy? Is it a societal construct? What is it? Because before we start saying it's failing, let's deconstruct what patriarchy is and where it came from and why it exists.
I think patriarchy established itself from a role of responsibility. However, what has happened over time is that responsibility has turned towards dominance and leaving the responsibility behind, not necessarily looking at what then must I do in terms of protection, in terms of provision. Because if you look at the patriarchal system in traditional times, women didn't have an issue.
They didn't.
With the patriarchy.
Because the roles were clear.
They didn't, because the roles were clear. And they were actually happy to thrive under that kind of establishment.
And what were the roles?
It was provision. The man would go out and he would bring in. He would take care of his children. He would take care of his wives, because in most cases, we didn't have just one wife. He would take care of his wives. He would take care of his homes. And women were very happy to operate under a system like that, because they did not feel like they were being... And it would be interesting to note, just before you go on to that we didn't, if you look at history, and if you look at history, even just in Africa, if you look at the traditional stories that we were told, incidences of abuse did not exist.
Not really.
And that's why I'm saying
Christian,
and that's why I'm saying,
yes.
and
so
that's why I'm saying that the issue of dominance came
and
in.
even during Christianity.
It sounds to me like we lived in perfect harmony before Christianity.
And when dominance came in, incidences of abuse increased. Mm-hmm. So when it was patriarchy was looked at it from a responsibility stance, we didn't have problems. We didn't have this kind of, I'm just going to call it nonsense that we see today. We didn't have it. Whether we go from pilfering, whether we go from stealing, thievery, corruption, etc., abuse of women, across the line, we didn't have incidences of such when men were looking at it from a point of when we're looking at patriarchy from a point of responsibility as from a point of dominance.
Njeri, the point I'm trying to raise here, the things we're stating, most people understand and they know well. I am talking about the hypocrisy that arises from this so-called evolution that we have had, where that claim to fame and position that men have, and the hypocrisy which follows, because on the one hand they're stated Christians, but in terms of conduct they are not. For instance, church attendance, which most people think are not important. People judge you in this country by your church attendance. You may not think so, but they do.
Is there a scale like
it's
one?
A reality.
Did you go to church yesterday?
Yes.
1 out of 52 is like one attendance in a year.
No, people want to be associated with going to church.
They want to be seen to be associated with going to church. They want to be seen to be doing it. It's important other people know that they've gone
There's
to
also,
church.
if you ask somebody, are you a Christian? Do you believe? Do you go to church?
Yes.
It follows.
It's a trade-off. I am saying that there's a hypocrisy that has arisen from this, and this hypocrisy is at the heart of these problems. There's a conflict, because a lot of the things that we see even in leadership, it's conflict. These are conflicted people. They say this, they do the other. They do the other, they say the other. and it's a mishmash.
They think this, they practice
someone
the
is a
other.
church leader, yet he goes around insulting people at the pulpit.
So maybe the structures that we've been forced into, it's not our natural habitat as Kenyans. Maybe we're being forced into certain ways of being as a society, including things like
Why don't
democracy,
you just go straight ahead
capitalism,
and blame
Christianity. No, I'm just suggesting, because
go
we see
straight ahead and say,
what you're saying is we're
yes.
being pretentious. We're actually at conflict and loggerheads
Yes,
with
we
the
are.
ideals of Christianity.
Yes.
But we want to pretend to be Christian. So of course there is the stigma and taboo of not being Christian, which was imposed upon us. So if you say you're not Christian, you're demonized, you're labeled a devil worshipper and so on. And there's a serious taboo that comes with it. We haven't opened ourselves up to the idea that there are non-Christians, there are non-religious people, and it's okay, and they're good people. In fact, some of the so-called countries with the highest morals or on the morality index, they're
Based
actually
on?
non-religious, based on a number of criteria from
We will
how
look
they
at the-
look at.
we will look at the criteria.
We'll look at the criteria, but things ranging from how they treat their poor in society, alcohol abuse, things like that, corruption, whether they encourage a creativity culture, intellectual endeavors, happiness, open trade. I mean, the list is it's exhaustive, but it's perfect in terms of determining how a society is performing.
Another deep conversation that CT Muga has raised this morning. The men of Kenya have failed, and that's why we have all these problems in the country. It's because the men have actually failed in the responsibility. And we tie this to church and going to church, right? And this is
Yes.
what CT is
I
saying.
think it's more the
0719
church.
012 We'd love to know what you think. 26 minutes to 9 o'clock.
All right, the situation on Thika Road hasn't changed much. A little bit of traffic bumper to bumper as you get into the CBT. Ngong Road is going to give us some problems, like I said, through the weekend. We'll keep letting you know so that you're aware that when you're getting onto Ngong Road and you find traffic, it's because of the show that opens up this week. Mombasa Road heading out towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout is easy moving into the CBD. We have no problems coming from Langata Road getting into the CBD as well. Traffic is moving along. Everything looks to be hunky-dory. You see a different situation, do give us a call, send us a message, 0719-012-600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
And in Mombasa, it's 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.6 in Malindi. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. I'm Eric Latiff, Ndu Okoh is in the room, and Njeri Thorne and CT Muga, who's raised another one of his typical conversations every morning. So he's basically challenging our thinking. And he's saying that men in this country have failed. I said failing, he said no. Fail. And some of the reasons that we are seeing many of the ills in our society is because of the failure of men who are also in positions of leadership. They dominate all other spheres of our society. Leadership in parliament, in civil service, and that's why we have all these problems. Because in church as well. And then you had to tie this into church, and that's what you were raising, and you're saying we don't go to church.
No, men don't go to church. You see, we function from a worldview. We may not know this, but there's a worldview that each individual has, and that's how they approach the world. There's a fulcrum from which they sort of like orbit. And why I'm saying the center isn't holding here is for most Kenyans who claim to be Christians, that orbit is supposed to be centered in the church and their belief and their faith in Christianity. And I'm saying that what is the reality is that it's hypocritical. So because of the hypocrisy, you have a situation where people are in conflict. Now, you're Christian. People never go to church. They don't. Now, if this is considered to be something, a paragon by which people can determine virtue, the example that you're setting, you may say it, but you don't do it. And I'm saying, then just by the lack of attendance, just the absence and lack of attendance of this thing they consider and they speak of as being important in their lives, if attendance, and they don't attend, the percentages from those who've done the work, they claim it to be something that ranges between 24 and 30%. It's not good statistics, but men just simply don't.
24 and 30% attend church.
Attend church.
So what are you saying, CT, that men need to attend church so that the country can be run better?
Moral compass.
I'm saying that they don't have a moral compass. So the situation that we're seeing is going to get worse, not better. If you say one thing and do the opposite, you are in conflict.
And the church comes into this how?
Because the church is where they get their moral compass from.
And why should that? Why should they derive it from that? If you have an internal moral barometer, surely it should be informed by a number of different
You
factors.
brought in a different discussion.
It gets oiled by the church.
Yes.
Why? Why should the church be a part of it?
Because that's what their belief system is made
Yes,
up
well,
of. That's what they
that's
say
the
they
way-
are.
that's what
This
it's
is who they
based on.
say they are.
Yes.
This is who they say they
You
are.
see,
So
that's
this
your
is where you
spirituality,
must.
your
Yes.
morals.
I like
But that
the way
is where
Jerry
you
is
go
asking-
to
you know,
drink.
Jerry is asking
That
this
is where
question
you
from
go
a very,
to
very,
nourish.
she's even sounding so innocent. Like, why?
No, this is what I'm asking. Why should we derive? Is the church the custodian, sole
Yes.
custodian of morals?
Yes.
It's clear that it's coming from the point
Yes.
that these are 83% of these,
84.
84% of these say they are Christians. They have no moral compass. The place where they should actually go to get this moral nourishment or
They don't
spiritual
go
nourishment,
to.
they do not go. So we have individuals who are not functioning.
Maybe they're Christians in that they believe in God and Jesus, but they don't buy into some of the tenets of the Bible, which, first of all, advocates for slavery and things like that. And we need to move on from this archaic doctrine. The world has evolved enough. I mean, how does the world actually, what are the provisions in terms of use of the internet?
Which
You see-
which brand of Christianity are you speaking
No, I'm
of?
just, oh, in terms of slavery?
Yeah,
I speak
which
of
one
the
you
Old
speak of?
Testament. I speak of the Old Testament, and they talk about looking after your slaves properly. It condones slavery.
African communities encouraged and had slaves, and before even they knew there's anything called Christianity existed.
I don't
It's
dispute that, but
mankind.
what I'm
It's
saying,
mankind,
what I'm
not
saying is the
Christianity.
Bible actually condones this. It actually makes provisions for how to treat your slaves. There's some things in the Bible that we don't need to embrace fully. There's actual stories in the Bible that teach us life lessons and give us a framework through which to navigate life. But having said that, there's many other aspects of life or many other things that could inform our moral compass, our internal barometer. It's not just the church, and this is why we're at conflict.
so
We
these
say
people
we go
who say
to
they are
church.
Christians, where should they go?
Where else should they look?
Where should they go?
So it's only the Bible through which they derive their way of living.
But
But
this
they're
is-
Christians.
No, you can be a Christian and still look at
No.
how. Yes, absolutely. They
No.
read self-help books, for instance. I'm not saying that is the right pillar, but they lean on that pillar.
They may, in addition to what they do, but the fundamental
Chri-
belief,
with
Jerry
the
wants,
Christians,
fundamental
Jerry wants
belief,
to rewrite this for them.
the fundamental
So
belief
tell us,
system
what
that
should
they
they do?
have, that they have actually proclaimed to
I have,
have,
the
is
phone lines
Christianity.
open.
So
Okay.
they actually need a religion in order to exist as a good person.
That's who they say they
Without
are.
it. No, you can be a Christian, but you don't have to follow the tenets of
Then-
Christianity.
then
you
you're
can
not a
believe in the
Christian.
Bible.
Then you're not a
Well, you
Christian.
have
Then you're not a
no. You have a
Christian.
relationship with
I
God.
have the phone lines open. 0719-012-600. Lydia, good morning.
Good morning, Spice FM. Thank you for the good program.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that when I was a little child, I'm a Catholic. From the age of 7, we have to receive Holy Communion, go for confession. All the girls went to one confession box, and all the boys were on the other opposite confession box. And quite often the priest would come out and smack the boy and beat him up. It was terrible. And now I heard that these pedophile priests beat up a child and says, I want to see you in my office. And then rapes him or whatever. This is now, I'm not saying that happened when I was a child, but now this is what I heard now, that this is what priests do. Then again, the Muslim religion says, if you got a misbehaved child, bring him to us.
Yeah.
Only to find that almost 300 of them are locked and chained and sexually abused. Now look, how does religion work that way?
Lydia, are you saying
And
that
then-
this could be the reason
No,
why
let,
men are
let
avoiding
Lydia
church?
talk a little bit more. I'm enjoying
I'm just saying that I'm finding religion very strange. And then if you are a Catholic, Sunday is our day. If you are a 7-day Adventist, Saturday is our day. If you are a so-and-so, they only want to separate and break up people. And yet God is one. So I always say, do I need a priest to pray for me?
No.
Can I not pray to for myself, me
You
and
need
God?
to go to church.
Okay, I have to if I have to.
That's
But-
the dogma that comes
I-
with Catholicism.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's instilled in you.
If I have something, If I have something to do, I'll
In
do
church,
it
you'll
and
go.
pray to God.
Okay.
I always say that the priest should not be the one. That means only the priest should help you to talk to God. Can't you be also an equal talker to God?
Absolutely.
I can hear all these pedophile jobs going on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Lydia.
Thank you. Some very sort of taboo topics there in terms of, is the church itself moral, let alone being the custodians of morality, and the fact that they should be involved in societal transformations and be guiding us. But of course there's accusations within churches, and one church in particular is notorious for kiddie fiddling or being involved with children, and it seems to be completely exempt from the arms of the law. So people start to question themselves, and this might be the reason, CT, why people are not going to church. When you look at the institution itself,
It's
and I'm
men.
not picking on any...
Women fill our churches, my dear.
Because they are
Men don't go.
depressed. Women, I'll tell you about Kenyan society. I'll be completely honest. The women are depressed because they're in crap marriages, and they look to the church for counseling. That's why you find women are still there. The men have decided... I don't want to have to go into this because I'm oversimplifying it. But with men, you can see why people will look at the church and the prosperity preaching and what the church itself is doing. The idea of wealth acquisition becomes what is at the core of the church and what the church is preaching, especially with a lot of these
Eric,
new
is there a
churches that
core?
are emerging. With a lot of these new churches that are emerging. And then what tends to happen is people don't have the faith in the church itself as a point or a pillar through which they should be taking their morals.
Are they
So
making
there is that element. I'm not saying that's the core of my
You know,
argument
you,
today.
you
but
never
there is
cease,
that
you
element.
never cease to impress me. For someone who knows nothing about Christianity, you know a lot.
But are you looking at that? You're blaming people for not going to church. Are you realizing
No,
that
it
maybe...
isn't blame. No, stating fact.
But
Remember, when you talk about depression, you forget there's something called fellowship. Huh? Human beings are social creatures, okay? A church provides a forum for people to
It
actually
does, absolutely.
chit-chat, meet, see? And it's the one place where you could actually claim there's an element of equality. See,
That's questionable, though. But there is a hierarchy within the church, even amongst the congregation, who sits in front, who gives the most. And those are the things that I think that are putting people off church.
Do you actually listen to the things I say? Or do you have this predetermined
talked
thing you
about-
want to say?
no, you talked
And-
about
and
the
so
idea of
irrespective
equality
what
in
I say,
church.
you will...
You talked about the idea of equality in church, and it's important that I correct you before you build on that premise. There is a hierarchy in the church in terms of you have people at the helm of the leadership in church, and then even amongst the congregation, there's certain people who can sit in the front pews.
you're discussing
because-
But
societal
you're in-
norms.
you're in the same church.
But
Yes.
they fall into the church. We can't isolate those
You're in the same
societal
church, and
norms.
you are in the same
can
fellowship.
be well.
And
I can be in
listening
the
to the
same
same
building
message.
as somebody I'm not equal
'Cause
with.
the message
There
is
is
about
no
fellowship.
equality in the church either.
The message is about fellowship. You're in the same church, in the same environment. You're both.
Yes, but
you're all
some are more
worshiping the
equal than
same-
others in that they can sit in front and you can't
No.
because they give more to the church. I have seen it with my own eyes.
You went to
Ask-
when you
ask
went
the
to
audience.
church.
Church.
Okay, no, I've seen it happen to other people.
No, you see that? Okay, in church.
Look, what I'm saying, and I think Lydia was highlighting it, and she talked about some really sort of awkward issues within society and the Catholic Church specifically. But what I'm saying is maybe the church itself is not serving the purpose that it used to serve. And this is perhaps why we're not seeing men attending church. There's actually a transformation that's going on even with the churches. And this idea of wealth and material acquisition has been brought to the fore. And maybe people don't feel they're succeeding or they're getting what they need from the church in terms of a moral compass of sorts. So the church is also... It's transformed and it's no longer serving the purpose that it used to. It's something we can't overlook. And the church itself, is it moral with what Lydia has brought out in terms of the pedophilia that we've seen? And then what tends to happen in the church, especially let's say abroad, what I've seen is when there's a case of pedophilia, the priest is transferred. This is not considered a national crime like it, they're not subject to the law. They seem to be exempt from, the national curriculum that is the law, and they're transferred to other churches. But more importantly, are people losing hope in the church? That should be the question that we're asking, not why aren't people going to church?
Before we ask the question that we should be discussing, which is not what CT is raising, let's hear from Kigan. Kigan, how are you?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Morning.
Fine, thank you, Kigan.
Yes, so I just wanted to just bring my 2 cents to the debate that's going on. From what I'm hearing, I think we're engaging in just religion bashing of some sorts and so forth. But just to like wrap up that point, I think at the end of the day, religion will always be flawed in some sense due to the fact that the custodians of religion are humans, and obviously humans, being the custodians and drivers, will always have issues. But the principles and the messages of the religions and the faith, I think, will always remain pure. Now, having that aside, I wanted to just backtrack to the conversation about, how men have failed society and would women necessarily play a better role in taking this country forward. But to that point, I just wanted to also mention that we also have to remember that a lot of the women leaders who've broken through in our society have had to do so in a male-dominated arena. So to me, I think a lot of the things that could potentially have made women better leaders have been eroded by the fact that they have to thrive in a man's world. So what would necessarily make them good or the good the good principles and tenets of what they could bring as a woman, I think you have to assess how that could come out when it's being eroded by the male society around them.
How would
for example, society and this thing of stealing and whatnot. I don't necessarily think that a lady would be any better because she has learned that she has to do this to get ahead in the current climate,
They've been contaminated by the existence of the male dominance. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. So until there's a fundamental shift or a fundamental acceptance of the woman's way of thinking and their principles, I don't think that it will be so straightforward.
Thank you again for your calling.
Interesting insights.
You sound like you're driving, are you?
Yes. I'm in traffic on University Way.
How is it looking?
It's moving fairly slowly, but nothing more than the norm.
Right.
Kigan, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Do you think, speaking as a man, that men would willingly want to have women change the role that they currently have in our society?
Well, it's easier said than done. I don't think this is something that can be done, within a generation. I think it's something that can be started in a generation, but fundamentally it will take a long time for the primordial instincts to accept women's ways and their way of doing things.
Why would it take a long time?
Because you see, these things they're entrenched in our fabric, they're entrenched in our upbringing. To unlearn these things, it can't be overnight, but it can be started overnight.
Let me ask, how long did it take before it was accepted in Kenyan society that girls could actually just go to school like boys? Did it take a very long time?
Well, that was something, I guess, that was aided by law and policy. But I guess, yes, sooner or later. And again, in terms of the time frame, I guess it was a generation or so, if I'm not mistaken. It wasn't something that was overnight, I don't think.
But you realize there's social constructs in that there's socially constructed behaviors that are sort of given or attributed to each gender. It's not something that is necessarily natural to us as mankind per se. You realize it's a complete construct. So it can be deconstructed and reconstructed if we would choose to go that way. Because I'll tell you, in other societies, you don't have this notion of gender roles per se. Yes, you have, mothers are the ones that women give birth, and that's a biological status. But you don't have the gender roles that are evinced in this country in terms of a man belongs here and a man should do this and a man should be respected by virtue of the fact that he has male genitalia. That's it. He deserves respect. You don't have that entrenched in I would say more modern societies. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with our society, but perhaps we need to move on from this idea that men should dominate and they should be respected by virtue of the fact that they're men, irrespective of what values, what behaviors, or their level of integrity, and so on. So what I'll say is there's social constructs, and we can undo or deconstruct and reconstruct. And I don't think we need the Bible, we need the church to lead us or guide us there.
What Njeri is telling you is what she doesn't need. So do not take it as a universal declaration.
Universal panacea.
No. You see,
universal panacea for these.
They seem to be countries that are better off. People are happier. The levels of corruption are lower. The way in which they look after the lowest in society is higher.
These countries you speak of, Njeri, what?
Yes, they don't.
Which countries are these?
Scandinavian countries. I think Sweden is the most ethical. Sweden.
What is the rate of suicide?
Let's hear Keegan.
Yeah, sorry, guys, if I can, I mean, you've made a pertinent point there, Njeri, and I must agree. But again, we have to remember these social constructs came by due to the fact there was a realization that between the two genders, one is better suited to certain tasks in society than the other. That was in the initial formation.
And how many centuries ago was this? The environment has changed significantly.
Yes, we have to Yes. And essentially what I was trying to come to was that some of these social constructs are built upon
a need. It was necessary, yeah.
That are completely extinct right now. Things that completely have no relevance to 2019 society.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, I also agree with you in the sense that, you see, just by virtue of you being one gender doesn't mean we should ascribe to you certain roles. And I'm talking about leadership now in terms of governance and leadership. I think that's nonsensical, and I think it should be very or purely meritocratic. Sorry, and but your gender should not disadvantage you in achieving whatever leadership position you want to get. I think that's also another crucial point. But again, you have to segment the governance and leadership from the home.
But even in the home, why should we segment it? Even in the home, gender roles needn't exist as they did previously. Remember before, the labor that the man had to do in order for provision, it was hand-based, it was heavy labor, you required strength. But with the world evolving as we have, industrialization and then now in technology, women can do what men used to do in order to earn money. Provision is no longer going out and hunting where you need to be strong and the physical prowess comes into it factors in. Today women can earn what men earn. What we need is money, and women can make just as much as men. So even in terms of the roles, we need to transition as well. As we transition in terms of leadership, we need to transition even in the home.
True, but I think the home will take a much longer time because that's something you can't change with policy or law. But again,
it can be encouraged with policy and law. It can definitely be encouraged. If women didn't have ceilings in the boardroom, they would continue working. If they didn't suffer the sort of pitfalls that come from maternity leave, being away, and so on. There's policies that could be put into place to start to realizing that even in the home you don't need certain roles.
No, certainly, and I agree with you there. And also, I mean, like what the point I was alluding to was, certain characteristics like, the nurturing of offspring and so forth. I think biologically women are more inclined to be better in that.
Why?
Men, not to say
because
that,
we've been told so?
No, not even. This is not a matter of nurture. I'm talking about biology in this sense. I think women are better suited to raise the young as compared to men. And I'm not incapable of men. There are plenty of examples of single fathers who raise children perfectly with as much love and care as a mother would. But I'm just saying, just as a when you hit the reset button, yes,
it's a hunch. Is this a hunch?
Keegan, don't let me take you down that rabbit hole. Okay.
Be careful.
Anyway, I'm going down a slippery slope, and I think you laid the bait for me, and I bit it.
Yes, you did.
Keegan, thank you very much for calling
Thanks,
this one.
Thanks, Keegan.
All the
Keep
best
listening.
in traffic.
Thank you. All right.
But going back to what you were raising, you're talking about, looking at our society and where we are as a country. Just basically focusing on Kenya. And you're saying that, we have very many men in position of, leadership and, in public service.
And
you're looking at what is it that ails us.
Yes.
Why are we behaving the way we behave?
If you want to look
And
at
you took it down to that point where you're looking at this.
You go around in circles. The government did this.
Who are these? That's what I wanted to go to. We talk about this, the way in which things are, and if you want to go down to the nitty gritty in terms of what has been stolen, in terms of who has operated, these are individuals.
Yes, they are.
It's not some system somewhere that has created some kind of individuals behind each and every one of these
Even
things.
those systems,
individuals
behind
walking,
them.
talking, breathing, operating, just like you and I. What has happened that it has become okay? Has there been no provision, and so people need to find an alternative source to be able to get these funds into their pockets? Has it been that you don't feel secure in yourself as a man, that you must now prefer some kind of abuse on a woman? There's so many things that go on that we definitely need to ask ourselves a question and see how we can point ourselves in the right direction when it comes to then being upstanding individuals, because the individual makes up the family makes up the society makes up the nation, and the nation that we have is what we are looking at that has failed us, made up of individuals. And if that is it, then how do we get back to the place where we were before, where we had nations who would be able to rally round? We had nations, we had systems in place that would be able to rally round and make sure that things are actually going forward in a positive way. How do we get back to that place?
So let's seek the solutions now. So first of all, but we need to have an agreement whether the men have actually failed in taking up their responsibility, and what has made them fail. Is it because of not adhering to their religious beliefs as well? Is it because of how they behave? Is it the
church?
Is it the church? Is it the mosques and all? Is it religion, or is it just because we are bad-mannered? That's all. 0719-012-600. We'd love to know what you think in the next hour. Also, you can comment on our Facebook page where we're live streaming. That's Facebook. It's Spice FM KE. And also on our website, www.spicefm.co.ke. This is a Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insight.